This is the Washington Times front page for Monday, June 14th, 2021. Thanks for starting your week with us. I'm George Gerbo. A Department of Homeland Security-backed study has found it's unlikely Central American countries can boost their economies enough to stop their residents from trying to migrate to the United States. Stephen Dinan reports a study from the Borders, Trade, and Immigration Institute says the Central American economies have become dangerously dependent on migration to the U.S. because of the cash their citizens send back home. That, in turn, may be hurting the country's export markets, further depressing the economies. Economic opportunity is the overwhelming factor for most traditional migrants to make the trip to the U.S. To that end, the Institute estimates incomes rise tenfold for migrants from the key Northern Triangle countries of Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador by working in the U.S. The findings were released as Vice President Kamala Harris returned from a trip to the region. She said the border surge has been spawned by people seeking better jobs, fleeing violence, or being pushed from their homes by environmental effects. In Israel, a coalition of 8 parties headed by the conservative Naftali Bennett and centrist Yair Lapid now controls enough seats in the 120-member Knesset to oust Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Foreign editor David Sands reports the final vote, taken after hours of debate, was 60-59 with 1 abstention. The vote was the culmination of 2 years of political gridlock and 4 inconclusive elections centered largely on Netanyahu, whose conservative Likud party still controls the largest single block of seats in the Israeli legislature. He now faces a difficult path personally and professionally, including an indictment on corruption charges. Bennett, a 49-year-old former tech entrepreneur who spent part of his childhood in Canada and the U.S., said he promised to fashion a government that would represent all of Israel. If a politician holding public office can end up in jail, then why can't an inmate take the opposite journey, from being locked away to helping lead a community? It's an audacious question 5 inmates at the D.C. jail are asking by running for elected office while still incarcerated. Metro reporter Emily Zanto has the story of the inmates: Aaron Brown, Gary Proctor, Joel Caston, Keith Littlepage-L, and Kim Thompson. Theirs are the only names on the ballot for a Ward 7 Advisory Neighborhood Commission seat that's been vacant for a decade. That will change on Tuesday, thanks in large part to district activist Julie Johnson, a co-founder of Neighbors for Justice, a prisoners' rights group. Unpaid A and C commissioners represent more than 200 neighborhoods spread across 40 districts in D.C. Commissioners hold monthly meetings with residents to help resolve problems in their neighborhoods and advise government agencies on matters that affect their areas. Ward 7 voters can cast their ballots Tuesday at the Park Kennedy apartment complex or from within the jail. A reminder that you can find all these stories at WashingtonTimes.com/front page. Don't have access to the Times yet? Visit WashingtonTimes.com/George and get 25% off your annual subscription. At the Pentagon, service members have complained about receiving reading lists of critical race theory books as part of the Pentagon's new anti-extremism and diversity training. Joseph Clark reports Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton has revealed some of the hundreds of complaints from service members who object to the teaching. Cotton received the complaints through a website he launched with Texas Congressman Dan Crenshaw. The complaints follow Pentagon efforts to stamp out extremism in the ranks after current and former troops were identified in the pro-Trump insurrection at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. Pentagon officials defend the training. They say it promotes diversity, equity, and inclusion in the armed forces. And finally, in another installment of the Big Talk series, James Varney talks with Kendall Qualls, the founder of Take Charge. The nonprofit group says it aims to counter the narrative that the U.S. is structured to undermine the lives of Black Americans. He and his group have taken that message on a tour of Minnesota this week in response to unrest over police killings of Black men and efforts to defund police forces. Find all of today's front page stories at WashingtonTimes.com/front page or on the Washington Times app, and subscribe for free to the front page. Just search Washington Times on your favorite podcast platforms. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Wash Times for breaking news, sports, commentary, and more. For the Washington Times, I'm George Gerbo.